Welcome to my basement studio. Unfortunately, I can't use the outdoor studio because there's smoke everywhere and the garage doesn't have great insulation. So I'm down here giving you this tutorial so that I can talk to you about specifics about ethos. Now, I know you're going to be missing the owl friends, but I do have this small Josh Allen character. So there's that in case I need an audience. He's there and you're there. So we're looking at specific appeals within ethos. So these are ways that you can basically specify when you say there's an ethos appeal, you want to be able to specify that even further. So there's a list available to you, and in that list are the following, and I'm going to use my cheat sheet right next to me, but the first of those things is shared values. So that's one of the things we might use for ethos to make you believe that I am credible. If I say something like, we all care about students, then you would look at me and say, oh good, this speaker cares about students. Or I might say to Josh Allen, we all care about winning, and fortunately they won. So he'll say, oh good, you care about it too. That's a shared value. That's something we value. You can use anything, of course, in your life to think about what values those might be. Those values could be generosity, it could be kindness, it could also be darker things, right? Those values could be like hatred or anger. And unfortunately, people use those as well in order to establish ethos. The next one, obviously, is kind of broadly synonymous to ethos, which is just credibility. Right, and there's so many ways we create credibility. We dress a certain way, we talk a certain way, we act a certain way. All those create credibility within certain groups. Obviously, some groups don't agree that credibility is built in the way that other groups might. If you're approaching a group of, wealthy philanthropists, you might approach them differently than a group of skateboarders. The credibility gap could be there depending on the group and who you're trying to appeal to and how you're trying to appeal to that group. The next one is pretty simple, but it's authority. So it's appealing to your authority. So if I'm going to use that, or you're going to hear that, that would be something in which I might say, now I've run this company for 20 years, or I've been a teacher at Jesuit for 14 years, or I have written 100 junior papers, or I have taught your father or your sibling. And that is an appeal to authority, right? I have some kind of authority in the circumstance. Now, oftentimes we use that with titles, right? So if someone, for instance, is a doctor, then we see them as an authority on something. They're a doctor of their field, whatever that might be, in science or in letters. If they're a lawyer, they're also an authority because someone has said, we give you authority. One of the reasons why college is important, and one of the reasons why Jesuit's important, is people feel that there's an authority to that diploma or that certificate that says you have accomplished a certain thing. And that's built up over time, right? It's not always just granted to someone. Next, we have trustworthiness. This one's pretty straightforward, but it's so central to good ethos, and that's being trustworthy. And all the many things, and we could talk about this for a long time, all those many things that create trust. What causes a person to say, okay, I do trust this individual? And how quickly can that be broken? So I would hope that you would trust me with teaching you an English class. Even if I challenge you, even if I do something that you don't agree with, if you trust me, you're going to allow that to occur for a certain amount of time. Now, eventually you might say, this isn't working for me, and that trust can be broken. And we see this in relationships, of course, all the time. And this is one of the hardest things about relationships, is we are human, we are dynamic people, and we make mistakes. So that trustworthiness, though, is so critical, ultimately, to ethos and to appealing to an audience. Because if the audience doesn't trust you, it's over. So look for those key elements of trustworthiness in the speaker, and how do they create those things? Just like all these, but specifically, how do you create trust? There's a lot you can read about it, and we won't get to nearly all of it, but it's something really to think about. The last one is clear motives. This has a lot to do with also hypocrisy, but those clear motives are, illustrated when someone comes into a circumstance and says, this is why I'm here. So for instance, if you've ever felt duped by someone, that's sometimes because their motives changed. They weren't clear. Originally, you thought they were coming in to do one thing, and then they ended up doing another thing, and you felt duped by them. So those clear motives are important. And as a speaker, you can establish those early on. I do this in class pretty frequently. I say, here's the purpose of our lesson. Here's why I want you to do this certain activity. This is my goal here. And that's to illustrate that my motives are clear. I want you to feel comfortable with those motives. Hopefully you do that in circumstances as well. If you say, hey folks, I would like to do this following thing. Here are my motives for doing so. Sometimes that can help them to say, okay, that's reasonable. You seem credible related to this desire or this request. So those are, let's see, I think it was 5 different sub-elements, sub-methods, I'd say, through which you can appeal to ethos. And that way, when you're analyzing something, you don't simply have to say, the speaker is appealing to ethos. You can instead say something like, the speaker is appealing to their own credibility. The speaker is appealing to their own clear motives. The speaker is sharing values with the audience. Those type of things come up, and those are things you could analyze rhetorically. So for instance, if you saw the shared values, you might say, oh, that's really interesting. They brought up words that are synonymous with values of justice. They brought that up 4 or 5 times at the beginning of their speech, and they're trying to establish those shared values. Rarely are you going to see it clearly articulated. They're not going to say, here are my shared values with you, the audience. Similarly, they're not going to say, here's why I'm credible. Instead, they're going to say, I've been doing this work for this long, I know these people, and I am this credible for these reasons, whatever. So they're gonna say that much more subtly, and it's your job to identify that, oh, that makes sense, that is credible, or that is a shared value, or that is a clear motive, or trustworthy, all that stuff. So that's ethos in a nutshell.